School compositional effects are the hypothesized relationship between student demographic profiles and outcomes. Demographic factors that have been of interest in compositional research have largely been ethnicity and socioeconomic status. These factors have been aggregated to the classroom or cohort level to examine their influence on academic performance, school attendance rates, graduation rates, and tertiary enrolment rates. A common finding is that after controlling for individual student demographic factors, the more socially advantaged a class or cohort is, the higher is its achievement in socially desired schooling outcomes. School compositional effects require the analysis of demographic factors at two levels, the individual level and the group level. When socioeconomic status is the factor of interest, the first level is individual socioeconomic status. This is controlled to account for the well-established influence of individual family background on school performance measures. The second level is the average socioeconomic status of the cohort or class of students under analysis. The second level is from where compositional effects emerge. Once controlling for individual socioeconomic status, researchers can consider compositional effects. A common method for exploring compositional effects is through hierarchical modelling. It is able to capture social effects emerging from individuals within groups where they are similar to each other in some aspect. Two-level hierarchical modelling divides the total amount of variation in a sample into two levels. The first level is the amount of variation within groups. For example, how much of the variation in academic performance is due to differences in individual student socioeconomic status within schools. The second level is the amount of variation between groups. For example, how much of the variation in academic performance is due to average school demographic. The centrality of socioeconomic status within compositional research means that careful attention needs to be paid to its conceptualization and operationalization. Mueller and Parcell have been influential in the literature, defining socioeconomic status as a person's relative position within a hierarchy of access or control to socially valued goods such as wealth, power, and prestige. This three-dimensional definition is based on Max Weber's model of social stratification. Measures of socioeconomic status in the education literature have focused on the wealth and prestige dimensions. Wealth has been measured through family income and family possessions. Parental education and parental occupation may capture both prestige and earning capacity. I'm unaware of any measures that aim to capture the Weberian power dimension, but Mueller and Parcell have argued that occupational status is the best single measure of socioeconomic status as it predicts income, power, and prestige. Empirical research can shed light on which measures of socioeconomic status are the most effective predictors of educational outcomes. At the individual level, a meta-analysis by Siren found that the strength of the relationship between socioeconomic status and academic performance varied by measures, with the strongest being home possessions, followed by access to subsidised school meals, parental education, parental income, and parental occupational status in descending order. Within compositional research, a meta-analysis by Van Nieuwijk and Slegers found that the relationship between school socioeconomic composition and academic performance was strongest with composite measures of socioeconomic status, followed by parental occupation, parental education, access to subsidised school lunches, and home resources. This difference in the ordering of relationship strengths suggests that the different socioeconomic factors may vary their relationship with academic performance at different levels of. Jenks and Mayer have identified three theoretical approaches that underlie research into neighbourhood and school contextual effects. They call these approaches collective socialisation models, institutional models, and epidemic models. Collective socialisation models look to the influence of non-parental adults from a child's local neighbourhood on their attitudes, beliefs, and behaviours. As this approach has had limited influence on compositional research, it would not be considered any further in this presentation. Institutional models are the basis of compositional studies within the field of school effectiveness research. Institutional models assume that social institutions differ in the way they treat their clients, depending on the average level of their social advantage or disadvantage. In schools, this means that the average total student demographic profile influences the schooling experience of students independent of their own individual background. Contingency theory was used by Palade as a development of the institutional model to explain how school composition influenced school effectiveness. Contingency theory argues that the social context of a school, such as its demographic profile, moderates its effectiveness. It predicts that the effectiveness of both school inputs and processes are influenced by its context. School inputs are factors such as resources, student backgrounds, and teacher qualifications. School processes are factors such as teaching practices and leadership quality. Applying this concept to high school academic achievement growth, Pollardi found that low socioeconomic schools were less effective in student learning growth than high socioeconomic schools due to composition. An alternative to considering how school effectiveness is moderated by composition is to examine what school factors mediate the relationship between composition and outcomes. For example, Rumberger and Pollardi found that school processes explain some to all of the relationship between high school academic growth and school composition. Willems found that the school resources also mediated some of the compositional effect. The research is not clear as to whether school composition moderates school effectiveness or whether differences in school resources and processes explain the school compositional effect. Moderation models assume all schools have the same or very similar resources and practices, but their effectiveness varies by school composition. Mediation models assume schools vary in their level of resources and utilisation of key practices according to their demographic composition. These differences matter in terms of policy responses aimed at ameliorating compositional effects. Moderation models suggest schools should adapt to suit their social context. That is, low SES schools should operate differently to high SES schools to raise their performance on common academic measures. Mediation models suggest schools with disadvantaged demographic profiles need additional support to enhance their implementation of effective practices and use of resources. In either case, a key policy question is whether compositional effects can be ameliorated to an acceptable level. If they cannot, then both moderation and mediation models suggest policies should aim at reducing. Epidemic models have been the theoretical basis of peer effects research in schools. Epidemic models assume that groups of young people come to share a common set of beliefs, values, attitudes, and behaviours through peer social interactions. They posit that through peer exposure, commonly observed behaviours within the group are more likely to occur with new members of the group. The key difference between compositional and peer effects research is that compositional research looks to group demographic factors as influencing individual outcomes, whereas peer effects look to specific behaviours or abilities within a group as influencing individual outcomes. A common issue with peer effects research is separating peer effects from being confounded by shared correlated effects. That is, individuals in a group may behave similarly not because of peer effects, but because they have similar individual characteristics that predict the outcome variable. Students are not randomly allocated to schools. Parents may seek to live in public school zones that have an above average enrolment share of high achieving students, or send their children to private schools for the same reason. Such parents may also provide other opportunities for their children's academic performance, such as tutoring, academically focused play, and other extracurricular opportunities. It may be that it is these out-of-school factors, which also correlate with parental school choice, that explain the peer effect. A common method for managing shared correlated effects is to control for family socioeconomic status. Pollardi compared the degree to which peer effects versus school resources and practices mediated the relationship between composition and post-school outcomes. He found that while both factors mediated graduation and college enrolment rates, peer effects had the strongest mediating relationship. Thus, epidemic models may offer a greater degree of explanation than institutional models.